It's time to review a blockbuster round 3 of this year's Rugby World Cup. Australia crumbled against Wales and looked set for their first ever pool stage exit, while Ireland grabbed a statement win against world champion South Africa. Joining myself in the full house of columnists today to look back at the weekend is South African rugby legend Kobus Wiese. Let's get going. We are now over halfway through the pool stages. We've got a pretty good idea of what the quarterfinals will look like after the two headline games at the weekend. One of them was every bit the contest we expected and hoped it would be, while the other one couldn't have been further from it. Australia are now set to go out at the pool stage for the first time. Headline of the weekend was that the world number one side, Ireland, made a big statement towards proving that they're the real deal this World Cup. Today, our special guest is someone whose nation was on the wrong side of that result. Kobus Wiese, how are you feeling about Saturday night?
Yeah, I think, Ollie, thanks for the invitation. I think it is an interesting one. It was always going to be a tough call. It's always going to be one of those games that won't have a big difference in score, and it could have gone either way. It take nothing away from the Irish. I thought they played with massive heart and spirit, as they always do. They absorbed a lot of pressure, and I think in the end, deservingly winners. But also in the same breath, I would like to say that if South Africa landed their kicks and again used one or two opportunities, could have gone the other way. But that was just the nature of the beast. That was the kind of game. Yeah,
11 points in kicks is a lot. And we'll get to that in a second, because obviously there's a certain name who could come back in to maybe fix that issue. In the press conference afterwards, Jacques Nienaber was asked whether he still felt South Africa could win the World Cup. I felt that question wasn't particularly well worded, but do you think your chance of winning the World Cup are any lower after that result at the weekend?
No, I also heard that chirp in the press conference, and there was a bit of sarcasm, I suppose, from the coach and the captain. But yeah, I thought it was a question that was a bit odd. I mean, of course, it's like saying the All Blacks who lost against the French in the opening game, are they now out of the World Cup? Of course they're not. Or the Welsh side, had a terrible season, but looking strong, getting there. England had a terrible season, but growing in confidence. So, of course, it's on the day. How many teams have you seen between the World Cups that they're sort of out of form, but then all of a sudden comes to World Cup time, they hit the button, and there they are. So I still say I think this is going to be a really interesting World Cup. I think a couple of surprises are still on the cards, there's no doubt, because some of the out-of-form teams are suddenly getting into form. And as you know, Ollie, World Cups are on the day. It's during the World Cup. If you hit form and you play correctly and you play your cards correctly, you keep your head, you're strong in the head, and make the right decisions. I mean, you're in it with a shout.
Brendan, I'm going to bring you in here. We've sort of spoken on this podcast about, this podcast has existed for about 18 months now, and we've spoken about the sort of games of that time period before, and there were two that stood out. It was France versus South Africa in the autumn and France versus Ireland earlier this year. Where does this rank?
It was a thunderous game. I found it quite an odd one in many ways. The sense of jeopardy, the tension, the spectacle, the intensity, the tackling was off the Richter scale, and that's enough for me. Funnily enough, I watched it back a bit yesterday morning, and it was a funny old game to watch once all those emotions come down. There's only 27 minutes of ball in play time, not a lot of it, which is pretty low by today's standards. Unbelievable Irish defence, but not a lot in attack. And I'm thinking, looking at that, if I was France, who would I want to play in the semi-final? And I rather fancy they'd want to play Ireland rather than South Africa. So it was a curious match, but just live watching it, it was a match which got your emotions, stirred up, and you were screaming at the TV screen there. So yeah, it was a terrific match. It was a terrific match, no question about it, but an odd match.
Yeah, 27. You're right. 27 minutes. That's not a lot. That's not a lot.
That's not a lot at all, given the current mantras of 40 minutes game time, and we've got to speed the game up, and yet it was a great spectacle.
What do you think that says?
I think it says that sometimes World Rugby and others get it all wrong with rugby. You don't need a 40-30 score line. You don't need 11 tries. All you need is 30 incredible rugby players going at it head to head.
Yeah. Let's Kobus, I want to ask you about the 7-1 and how you felt about that when it was announced. And obviously the general consensus is it didn't work. Would you have liked to have been part of a team? Did you ever play with a 7-1 bet? No, I guess there weren't as many subs back in your day, but would you have liked to be part of the team?
Well, as a former tight 5 forward, I mean, they can make it 8-0. You know, we don't need the backs really. I mean, forwards do all the hard graft and set up all the nice play for the backs. But I obviously say that tongue in cheek. It's interesting. I mean, it's been debatable and speculated and called. It's not in the spirit of the game and it's not the rules. But there's nothing wrong. I mean, it's all within the rules, as everybody knows. If it works for a team and that it's one of your strengths, I mean, why not? Which obviously South Africa has got great depth in forwards, as you guys know, and they've been really using that as a strength, and why not? So I was just a bit worried when you get 2 crucial injuries during a game like yesterday, you would be in trouble against a top tier side. Because it doesn't matter if you're a grade 7s player or you can play on the wing and cover the gaps there. But if it's the whole game against world-class opposition, it's going to bite you. There's no doubt about it. I think there's a lot being made of it. So I think Andy did his homework very well and they prepared for that. I agree with you, Ollie. I don't think it was that effective as in previous games. But the fact remains, it does work for South Africa and it will take a very strong opposition tackle force to neutralize that kind of tactic.
It just felt like as a result, when South Africa needed something in the last 15, 20 minutes of the game in attack, someone like a Willie LaRue would have been brilliant to bring off the bench, not just because of his attacking flair, but because he's played however many tests he's played. And obviously you guys didn't have that.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point you're making. Again, depending who you want to play, the Irish side has always been known, and I think Andy Farrell's done a great job. Not that they haven't had it before, but the Irish have shown they're not the number 1 side in the world currently for no reason. Their structures are really good. They're disciplined. They execute their game plan very, very well. They can absorb pressure. Their defense is really good. It's a side with very few weak points, if any. So there's no doubt about the fact that they are definitely one of the contenders for this World Cup. And they've got good backs. I mean, guys like Bandi Aki, he's been really putting his hand up in midfield. He carries well. He's one of the strengths in the midfield. They evolve their game around him with ball in hand when they're on the front foot. But then again, also their forwards, their forwards are really guys that play so well and discipline around the breakdown. When they have ball in hand, they protect it. They keep it within their fold. It's very difficult to defend against a side like that if you don't make a lot of mistakes. They don't give you a lot of opportunities.
I was fascinated by it. I thought that when Oxenche and the bomb squad front row came on, I thought Nche completely dominated Furlong. And I think that if they had a goal kicker who's a 85% plus man, South Africa would have won that game. They left 11 points off the scoreboard.
Yeah. My concern was, if I can come in here, is the fact that we persist on picking somebody at this stage that doesn't land at 85% plus, as you just said, at this level. It's crucial that when it's such a close game, that is the difference. As you've seen this past Saturday, there's no doubt. I'm a Manie Libbok fan. I think he's a very talented player. Make no mistake about it. Unfortunately, the 1 weak point at this stage would be his consistent level of accuracy when he kicks to the post. Yes, you've got a Faf, but Faf is a makeshift kicker. He's not really a reliable kicker or somebody who's done this for years at this level. So we must be careful. We've nearly gone through the pool stages now, but when you get to the playoffs, it's once you get one chance and that's it. So rather be safe than sorry. I would be very worried to continue with this. Pollard will be playing this weekend against Tonga, there's no doubt. My feeling is if he proves that his fitness is up to scratch, he might be the guy that will start in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that the goal kicking thing's fascinating because, looking at Manie Libbok, his goal kicking he's a very, very fine player, and his goal kicking in games where where South Africa are clearly in command is usually actually has been pretty good. But it's that, I think they refer to it now, those clutch goal kickers who, when the heat is really on and, it's a 2-point, 3-point game and the pressure on the kicker is huge. Those are the guys who are worth their weight in gold in World Cups, as Joel Stratsky, Wilkinson for England, and so on and so forth. These guys are the guys who make the difference very often when it comes to these knockout games.
Well, interesting point you made about bringing Joel in. Funny enough, just for what it's worth, Kitch Christie, the coach, said to Joel, just by the way, Joel, you should kick more drop goals. Why aren't you using? You can. You've proven it. Why haven't you done this more regularly? And then I think it was before the quarters or the semis, and then he spent a bit more time. And good Lord, behold, in the end, it was a telling factor. So,
yep.
I feel like I should bring in Chris, because I think, Chris, if correct me if I'm wrong, you were the one person who predicted an Ireland win last week, and you said that you would be feeling very smug this week. So now's your chance to rub our noses in it.
I do smug better than most people. I thought, look, that was a 50-50 call. I mean, it was a 50-50 game. I thought it was a wonderful match, actually. A wonderful contest, wonderful occasion. I agree with everything that's been said about the kicking. I mean, we wrote a column about it at the weekend. I mean, Stransky barely missed in that World Cup. I think he missed 2 kicks in the whole World Cup. You've got your Matthew Burks and these people. Pollard in the last final was punishing, absolutely punishing. Percy Montgomery was punishing when they played England in 2007. It's a massive thing. I think the Springboks genuinely want to play. I think they have broadened their attacking game really impressively. And I thought Willemse was brilliant against Ireland. I thought he did some really, really interesting, unusual, off-the-cuff kind of stuff, which did ask serious questions of the Irish defence. I think with their centres, and I think maybe the reluctance over Pollard, I mean, apart from the injury side of stuff, is the centres I mean, they can distribute, but they're not natural distributors in the way that some other centres are. I mean, they're very aggressive, very gain line type players. Am is that little bit different, and I think he was a big loss. I think they'd be more comfortable playing Pollard and keeping the attacking game if they had a more creative centre available to them. I don't know quite how it's all going to pan out. I think it's fascinating, but it does seem to me that they've nailed their colours to this idea that they're going to try and get the ball wide. They are going to take people on in the attacking sense. They've certainly got the armoury to do it. Whether that happens with Pollard at 10, as well as it has done in the past, I don't know. But if I was Erasmus, well, I think Erasmus is bound to pick Pollard for the big games, because in the end, that boot's going to win things for you.
I mean, Rassi's already said that Pollard will play against Tonga, hasn't he? So I guess he's nailed colours to the mast in that sense.
Yeah. Did he put that out on a tweet or a video or something?
Well, I've just seen it as a headline, to be honest.
Does he put anything out about the referee and that last ruck? That was an interesting one, wasn't it? The ball was sitting there like a poached egg. I mean, Kobus, what would you have said? Would you have mentioned something to the referee at that point?
No, I'll be the last guy to go and blame the referee for something. I thought he had a fair game. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, and obviously we say this tongue in cheek, but whenever you lose, then obviously that's the easy thing to go to. But it would be unfair to blame the referee. Yeah. There's no doubt. South Africa had opportunities. So did the Irish. They just came up better this time around. It's setting up the World Cup further for some exciting games. There's no doubt about this. you mentioned Pollard. I mean, I'm as a bigger Pollard fan, I think he's an extremely talented player. We've seen what great season he had in the UK for Leicester. He's been on brilliant form. He's one of the flyers with one of the best passes, flat passes, skipping 2-3 guys left and right. He's always had that since school. I mean, he's extremely talented. And I think in when it comes to goal kicking specifically, probably the more experienced and Libbok more level-headed at this stage, which doesn't belittle Libbok in any way. It's just I think he's much more experienced. But talking about the midfield, you guys, I've been an Andre Esterhuizen fan forever. I think he's also in brilliant form. They've tried a Keenan Moody, who's a recognised winger, who's been sensational on the wing against the All Blacks at Twickenham. I mean, he was an immediate hit. He's an incredibly gifted player. That's an exciting combination. Whether Rassie will use these potentially exciting combinations in crucial games, I doubt it. I think he's going to be extremely controversial, conservative. He's going to stick to those, which is a pity in a way, because I think you've got to give these youngsters an opportunity. You mentioned out wide, Curtly Aronson. That guy's been a try-scoring machine whenever he gets the chance. We know Colby Willemse is a bit like Henny Leroux played with me. They're geniuses. And Devon Safontein, an ex-Springbok scrum, used to say, those are the kind of players that not even themselves sometimes knows what the hell they're going to do when they get their ball in hand, because they're that talented. And you should allow those kind of players to play and then play around them and link onto them. So, yeah, I think I would stick with him at fullback, Willem. So I think he brings a lot of cloud, a lot of uncertainty for the opposition, because he's really you got to guess the whole time what he's doing. But it's interesting. I would rather be in this position than sort of flip a coin. Who the hell do I have to pick? Because there's like 10 oaks I can put on the wing, or 6 on the center, and so forth. This is what Rassie's got at this stage. But I would love to see, as you said, we must get the ball wide. We've got great forwards, but let's score tries. We've got these guys standing on the wing, and they getting cold, not getting balls sometimes.
I'd be tempted to get Esterhuizen involved. He's more skillful than people give him credit, I think. Yes, he's very strong going forward. He's got a fantastic left foot. He's a bit more of a complete centre. And if you want to maintain a bit of that, and obviously he works brilliantly with Quins, who play this wide, expansive game. So I'm not sure it's quite nailed down in midfield. But as you say, the conservative option would be to go with 2 tried and tested, strong, powerful, very, very aggressive in defence characters. You're not going to lose out there, but I think you could gain a bit by bringing Esterhuizen in.
Do you think, Kobus, there's anything to the argument that this has turned out, in respect of the Ireland game, this has turned out all right for the Boks? Because you might, irrespective of that game at Twickenham before the tournament started, you might fancy playing France who either don't have Dupont, or they have Dupont patched up with a plate in his cheek, and he'd be less than human if he took the field with a new plate and a fractured cheekbone. I mean, you might have done it, Kobus, but you were always less than human. It might be. I'm not sure France are going to be the same side with either without Dupont or with a very hesitant Dupont. It may be that Dupont gets out there and still plays a house down, but that might be a little bit more in the Springboks' favour than running into New Zealand, who might just be generating a little bit of momentum there.
I think it's a very interesting point and a fair point you're making. That the French with Dupont is a far better team. The loss of Interbach was also big for them. So it's 2 really important players in their whole machinery, which they play a huge role in creating play. That's a typical French. One thing Fabien Galtier has done, where the French has always been criticised in the past, that we've always known they've got flair, plenty of flair. They get born with flair, with emotion, but they never really had a pack of forwards that can really dominate against England or South Africa or the All Blacks and so forth. So now he's created a pack of forwards that can do the same, lay the foundation, talk with these big, with the others, more traditional forward-playing physical countries, like I've just said, with that arsenal of absolute brilliant talent at the back that can create anything from nowhere. Yes, it will be a massive loss for them if he can't play in a possible final. Before the injuries of these 2 players, I would have said I would rather play the French in a final. But one thing that I can tell you, anybody who writes off the All Blacks would be fools. There's no doubt. The history, the pride, the talent, everything is still there. It's still a world-class side. And I think they'll be focused when they get to a playoffs. There's no doubt about it. I would personally, in this instance now, I would play the French now and rather play the All Blacks in the final, if that answers your question.
Interesting.
It is. I'm intrigued, because it's a long way back, but I can remember Reeve playing in a Bastille Day win in New Zealand on tour with a broken shoulder against, and they won the test against the All Blacks. Dupont, I think, is a really gritty piece of work. We've seen that, so I'm not sure that he'll be too intimidated in that regard. But I also think that the depth that Galtier has built, there are two really, I'd say, I think Collieu is exceptional. I think he's very, very good. He's a very dangerous running halfback. He's got a good kicking game. And Luku, who very often gets a nod ahead of him off the bench, is a really nuggety piece of work as well. And is tested. They're both tested at this level. So it might be a different France. Well, it will be if Dupont isn't there, but that they will be massively less effective. I'm not sure. I
think you're right. I think you're right, Nick. That those two, the two backup scrum halves are quality individuals. They're quality players. Yeah. But Dupont has come to symbolise this team.
Yeah.
Everyone routinely just describes him as the best player in the world in any position. Yeah. I mean, people are worshipping at the throne of Dupont all over France, and it's quite tough, I think, for a team that has the pressures of tournament hosts on them. And so much of the sort of national rugby spirit has been invested in Dupont that it's not a question of whether he can be replaced skill-wise or strategically or tactically. It's a question of whether they can do without him emotionally.
Yeah,
that's a really big question.
It's a really good point too, and it sort of flips into another point, which is Dion Fourie is a. I mean, I've seen him playing obviously in the European Cup and so on and so forth for the Stormers. He's a very, very abrasive, very good player, no question about it. But what is he? Is he a back row forward or is he a hooker? Now, the loss of Malcolm Marx for the Springboks, for me, is highly significant. Not quite of the Dupont level, but very, very important player as far as South Africa is concerned. I'm interested to hear what you feel about that, Kobus.
The loss of Marx?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And please forgive me if you think I'm biased, but I think currently probably the best hooker in the world. The impact he brings to the game overall, not only lineouts, he's a massive scrummer because of he's quite a tall hooker, as you guys know. He's extremely physical. But at the breakdown point, he's a fourth loose forward. His seniority, no doubt. I can't agree with him. I think he's a massive loss. Very much in the same way to lose Dupont. I mean, to lose Dupont in French context is like they would decide tomorrow that croissant, baguette, and foie gras is no longer available to be eaten. I mean, it'll be a disaster. So that's what Dupont means to them. He's an iconic figure for them. And I think he's a really good leader, make no mistake. I mean, he keeps that side together between Dupont and Fabien Galtier. I think they've done a mindset change with the French. The French mentality, no disrespect, has always been sometimes going all walkabout one game, and the next game they're brilliant, and the next game they're crappy. But they've changed that. They've shown the last 2 or so odd years they can beat anybody in the world. They're mentally strong. They have the ability. And as you mentioned earlier, you guys, that playing at home, even with a loss of 2 or 3 players, the French support, there's this massive expectation, and the support are there. We can see at the stadiums it's great, the support in the World Cup. The vibe is brilliant. So the French are expecting their side to be in the final, come hell or high water. Doesn't matter against who.
You have to say, don't you, that it was because he's so tough physically, Dupont, and his injury record or his lack of injury record suggests that he's an unusually resilient specimen. So it was always going to be something a bit freakish to put him off the field. And it's sod's law that that's happened in a game that they were always going to win by miles. But some of the things he was doing again, I know it's Namibia and they were wholly outclassed and he had time and space that a top end side is not going to afford him. But some of the things he was doing, you struggle to do that in unopposed training and get it right. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. Some of his invention, the invention of his kicking was extraordinary to both wings, off either foot. I mean, if the tournament loses him, it'll be a bugger. It really will, because he is something to see, that bloke.
Well, I'm a bit reluctant to even comment on that because I was accused by a Namibian supporter on Facebook for sounding very exciting every time, or excited the French were scoring tries against the poor Namibia. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think it shows that they are serious. To latch on to what you just said, I think that they've shown that they are serious in this tournament. It's an opportunity for the French against anybody in the world in front of their home crowd to bring back the Webb Ellis Trophy, because it's the Webb Ellis Trophy, as you know, only been won once by a Northern Hemisphere side in the entire history of the Cup. So I think from a Northern Hemisphere, not only a French point of view, this is a really important World Cup for them.
And to return to your point about croissants and a possible shortage of them, it's because Franz Malherbe has eaten them all.
And Eddie Jones has said Australia want all of them now as well, don't they?
I was about to say, could have been Eddie Jones, over there. One ad, I don't know, you've seen it where he's at the bar, but says he's not going to France for the croissants. But it seems now that he actually did go to France for the
croissants. He doesn't have much choice anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, look, to put a slightly sour turn on the Dupont affair, I was very thankful that we got to see all the tricks he pulled out of the bag in the first half, especially that left-footed kick to Biabiari. But at half-time, I was slightly shouting, get Dupont off the field. Because what was the score at half-time? 54-0 at half-time?
54-0, wasn't it? It was a bit of a mindless call, wasn't it, by Gallagher? I think he took his eye off the ball there. He said afterwards he was going to take him off after 55. Well, what's the point of another 15 minutes? Just get him off. Basically, what's the point?
Seriously, a 54. I don't know that might. I'm one to sing Galtier's praises wherever possible. I think he
doesn't get much wrong, but he took his eye off the ball there.
That was really wrong.
I think you're probably enjoying it so much watching it, to be honest. Yeah. Ollie, just before we disappear from South Africa Island, because I know you've got loads to talk about, just a slightly downbeat note on Ireland, and I speak to somebody who's covered all but one of their World Cup campaigns, and you get used to, dampening expectations a little bit. A slight hurdle, I think, is that last match against Scotland. It is, it's going to be live, isn't it? They, Scotland are going to get a 5-point win over Romania, so they need an 8-point win over Ireland to qualify. So it's going to be a hell of a match. Now I go back to 2015, when it was a pretty good Ireland side that year, not as good as this side. And their campaign went wrong in their final pool match. They had a pool match against France, and it was warfare. And they lost 4 injuries, I think. And those who didn't get injured still had that game in their legs a week later when they got stuffed by the Pumas. And actually, France still had that game in their legs when they got absolutely massacred by New Zealand. So just a little bit of me wish that Ireland had somehow got the job done already. It's a bit of a banana skin in quite a few respects, that match against Scotland. Even if they win it, they could come out of it with a lot of damage.
Can we just go over the permutations of that? Because I'm not entirely clear. It does, obviously, Ireland can't get a losing bonus. Scotland need to win it 1. Ireland can't get a losing bonus point. But then surely, it's head-to-head then, isn't it, next?
Yeah, because then it becomes the head-to-head result. It's going to be a live match. It's a bit live, a bit more crucial than I think some Ireland supporters have yet woken up to after their weekend celebration.
A lot of people.
I think a lot will depend in that game on which of two malfunctioning lineouts loses the least of their own throws.
Yeah, and if a Scotland player gets to the shoulder to the head, that player actually gets sent off.
That was a belter, wasn't it?
What, the game?
No, that incident. I mean,
wasn't that an excellent decision?
I mean, why do you need eight minutes to make a wrong decision? You can make a really stupid decision in 8 seconds.
Yeah, but it's not the only one in the World Cup, is it? You know, and that's part of a wider problem. I mean, the French are actually very, very lucky still to have Taufifenua
indeed.
around because of the a similar challenge against the Uruguayans, I think. You know, so I mean, they need consistency, and not to have consistency in a bunker review when you've got another 10 minutes to review it or whatever is just nuts.
We never did get to see the replay of the Fakatoa tackle on Kinghorn, which looked a bit of a shocker in real time. They never even went back to it. I mean, I'd like to see that one again.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, I think the Taufifenua one, the Tonga winger whose name I currently can't remember, and the Jesse Creel one are the 3 out and out wrong decisions so far. Kobus,
makes you want to go back to South Africa, Canada in '95, Kobus, doesn't
it? Sorry, there seems to be a problem with the connection.
I think all we can say was that Gareth Rees got there as soon as he could.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting, this point on this. You know, the cards and I think that the biggest frustration would, for players, for coaches, for the man in the street, the rugby supporter is the inconsistency. You guys touched on it.
Yeah.
The referees are human. I'm really not knocking the referees, but sometimes it's so clear that it's the same exactly to the T, same incident, and it's a completely different manner in which it's been handled by the referee. And I'm not even talking the so-called bunker, which I still would like to know where the hell is this bunker and who is in this bunker.
I just hope it's not in Berlin.
Exactly.
Apparently,
anyway, why are these people in the bunkers not identified? What are we hiding here?
Well, the bunker is apparently Roland Garros tennis stadium in Paris. That's where it all got referred to.
I would suggest it's the bar at Roland Garros, some of their decisions.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that Scotland the Tonga one that should have been the red card, that was almost a carbon copy of a reason to downgrade the Tom Curry decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
High impact, high danger, ever so slight dip. It's not enough. It was a dread. Yeah. I agree with all of you. For the record, I actually thought Scotland versus Tonga, rather than the red cards, was a fantastic game. I don't think we have time to dwell on that too much today, because I think the headline from yesterday, the undoubted headline from yesterday was Australia. Chris, you're laughing. I don't know whether you're wanting to gloat. It'll be great to have David Campese back on at some point, given he spoke for 2.5 hours before the World Cup about how bad Australian rugby was.
No, I don't want to gloat at all. I got on well with Eddie, as people keep on reminding me. I was his one friend on earth, apparently. It was
Odie Hewett.
I've just watched his press conference, actually, where he kept on being asked about this supposed meeting he'd had with going back to Japan next year. I mean, talk about timing and embarrassment. And I mean, he denies it's happened. I don't know what you're talking about, mate. But it was interesting when an Australian reporter said, "Can you guarantee to Australian supporters that you will be coaching the Wallabies, that you won't be coaching Japan next year?" He said, "I'm committed to coaching the Wallabies." And he kept on saying, "I'm committed to coaching the Wallabies." Well, before he came to England, he said, "I'm committed to coaching the Stormers."
Mm-hmm.
Until he wasn't committed to coaching the Stormers. So, and over he came. I mean, it's just, I've had a lot of good times with Eddie. I find him a fascinating bloke. He's a brilliant talker about rugby, all that stuff. But if you allow your public persona to be such, and that if you basically trade on the fact that you're a my way or the highway sort of martinet of a coach, then when things go badly wrong, and Jesus, they've gone really badly wrong for the Wallabies, you're not going to generate much sympathy. I mean, it was just embarrassing. The TV director every time, you know, I mean, he had to focus a little bit on Eddie because he's such a big part of the story, but he could only do it for 2 seconds because of the cascades of boos from everyone. I mean, it was God. He looked pretty shell shocked in that.
Yeah, he didn't look as chipper as normal, did he? To be fair,
no, hardly. No.
I mean, you don't get loyalty with
minus.
Eddie, do you? You don't get loyalty with him. Like you say, he'd signed the contract with Stormers when the RFU came in with an offer they couldn't refuse. All the time at England, he was back to South Africa, back to Japan every summer to do coaching. He was writing books. By all accounts, in Australia last year, he was talking to the ARU when England were on tour. He doesn't open marriage, doesn't he? He does not do loyalty. So, and that's why you then don't get any sympathy because he can be a good coach. He can be very good in short doses. He hasn't been very good in short doses so far with Australia, but you get no sympathy when you're that sort of character.
No.
Yeah, that's.
I think from a neutral point of view, I actually pity the Wallaby, the players, and I also, to be fair, I think also these problems, whatever those problems might be in the Wallaby camp or in Wallaby rugby at this stage, started before Eddie came back to them as well. There's something wrong. It's a more deeper thing, to be honest, and I think to be fair. But if it's true that he's going to Japan next year, I would say this tongue in cheek. I would be really making sure that my lawyer look over my contract and just remove the harikiri clause there. It might be a problem.
You could say, Kobus, couldn't you, that the Wallabies now, in terms of the World Cup perspective, they're in the hole that the Springboks found themselves in around 2003. That time when Strowley was coach, and there was a lot of controversy around his approach. I seem to remember, certainly to training and camp style and all that stuff. The difference between the Wallabies and the Boks is no matter how bad the Boks are, and they weren't very good in 2003, rugby is still absolutely a part of the beating heart of sport in South Africa. Rugby union is not that in Australia. It's got a lot more meaningful competition. And the more incidents like this you get, the more failures of this profundity that you get, the stronger NRL and Aussie rules and football, the stronger they become. So it much more of this, and you can see the Wallabies becoming an irrelevance in their own country, and that would be terrible. It'd be terrible for the wider game, and it would be take a lot of pulling back in Australia.
Well, there's a Lions tour and World Cup coming up within the next 4 years in Australia. Rugby needs Australia to somehow get their act together.
Yeah, well, you don't want a Lions tour where no one's interested.
No, not after the last one.
I think you guys are touched on. Touched on. It's really true. Yes, Aussie rules and the rugby league and cricket even are major sports, have always been. But maybe the Australian Rugby Union needs to up their game and get more youngsters involved and do more better marketing. We can't always just blame the players and the coaches. The bodies, the unions need to do something about that. This hasn't started 2-3 years ago. It's been like this for many a year. And it does help if rugby is really part of your fibre. You're dead right about that. It's a bit easier. But in Australia, it's always been a stepchild that's been fighting against these bigger boys, which is the rules and the Aussie and horse racing and cricket and these kind of things. But, I mean, that's a fact. So what are they doing about it? I mean, David Campese, one of the greatest Wallabies of all times, have been saying this for a long time, that this is a problem and they need to do something about it. And unfortunately, now it's boiled over.
Yeah,
I think
he was telling us that, wasn't he? He was telling us that on this podcast. In fact, he told us about it for so long, he drank 2 bottles of wine.
He told us about it again.
I think that Campo, are you guys sure?
Oh no, I'm not saying he bought them.
I think that they have been asleep on the job.
Yeah.
I'm certainly one thing that I'm aware of is that Aussie rules, these other sports are extremely aggressive in the way in which they market themselves, their broadcast deals and so on, they're wall to wall. It's very much the sort of American, model in many ways in terms of the monopoly of the big sports. And rugby union hasn't managed to become one of those. I know that one thing that the Aussie rules people did, because they were, for a long time, they were basically just stuck in Victoria, Western Australia and South Australia. It wasn't a nationwide sport. It was very, very well supported where it was. But they specifically went into schools in New South Wales and in Queensland, and they took their game lock, stock and barrel into those schools. They said, we'll bring the coaches in, we'll organize the fixtures, we'll set up the training regimes and so on and so forth. Now, union hasn't responded. I don't believe in any way. They always thought that the private schools there were going to be their feeder system forever and a day, and things change, and they have not adapted at all. And I think that there's massive frustration there because of the administration. And the administration, they're not the only people who've got problems with the administration of the sport. It's one of the bugbears about the sport in general, I think, at the moment. And we definitely need some really high caliber administrators in this sport badly. And they
well, I think so. I think they've moved. There's a little light down the tunnel. Phil Waugh has been appointed as CEO, which is a former top player, which is already a step in the right direction. I'm not saying if you haven't played the game at the top level, you never can be the CEO or a coach of a national team. Not at all, but it helps a hell of a lot. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. No, I'm sure that that's a step in the right direction, but it's taken a long time to come. It's a long time coming. I mean, as you say, this has been down the track, and also along the way, the treatment of Dave Rennie, the previous coach, has not done them any favors at all. The parachuting of Jones straight in, and Rennie sort of ushered through the exit straight away, when he's doing, he did a significantly better job than Jones has managed to do since he's come in. So
there's that expression, isn't it? Make hay slowly. Rennie was doing okay, and he brought a B team up last autumn, won 2 test matches, had no right to win, nearly beat France, could have beaten Ireland. And I thought Australia were making significant progress there. And if they could have batted on, I thought they'd be a decent team. And that was, dynamited with just the appointment of Eddie Jones. I've no idea what the ARU thought they were doing there.
I think it's a serious thing. Obviously, it's easy to overreact 24 hours after a defeat like that, even a defeat that was so surprising in its nature. As that. I mean, I wasn't astonished that Wales won the game. Gatland's got a pretty good track record in tournament rugby of getting his side fit and getting them understanding what they can and cannot do, or what they should or should not be doing, and they're quite difficult to beat. And Springboks have found them difficult to beat in recent tournaments. That semi-final in 2019 was really close against a Wales side which wasn't star-studded particularly. This is less star-studded, but they're quite effective. But if the Wallabies are as bad as they made themselves out to be last night, and they are pretty much, far more than in other major, big-time foundation union countries, they are the be-all and end-all of the game in their country. They are the absolute visible, they're the biggest visible symbol, the overwhelmingly the biggest symbol of rugby union in Australia. If they're as bad as they looked last night, then the sport in general has a bit of a problem, because it can't really afford a weak Australia. It needs a good Wallaby side. And I don't know where it's going to come from at the moment. I think it's of some concern, because that's a big market to lose, or not to lose, but it's a big market to allow to diminish.
It's interesting narrative-wise that I believe the last game under Dave Rennie, it was against Wales, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was.
And they won. They won 39-34 in Cardiff. So, well,
I think it was about a 20-point comeback, wasn't it, in the last 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And as a result, the Wales coach got sacked. I mean, talk about sliding doors moments.
Yeah. And this time around, they were 20 points down with 20, 30 minutes to go as well. And Another points was scored, but in the other direction.
There was a sliding doors moment in the game, wasn't there, last night?
Oh yeah, the line out.
I mean, Parecki chucked a line-out throw to no one. Well, he ended up with Jack Morgan, and I mean, crikey, who knew he was going to give?
Was that not the first line out in the entire tournament?
50-22. It was a tight game. It was a tight game. The Wallabies were playing some rugby,
Well,
and suddenly they're 13-6 down.
Yeah, they were 10-6 down at that point, right? They had the 3 and then kicked the corner instead.
And not one of them got up. Not one of them jumped.
No. There were,
and then not one of them chased the ball back either. If that hadn't gone into touch, there was 2 Welshmen who could score.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody saw a 40 points to 6 result.
No.
While we're on it, how about Gareth Anscombe? Now, we were talking about Biggar last week, the joys of Dan Biggar, and a hell of a player he is and talisman. But that was a superb performance off the bench for Anscombe. I mean, he was consummate. And actually, I thought the Welsh backs were beginning to click a little bit more than we've seen so far. Maybe not against the greatest defence we've seen in the tournament, but the time he's had with injuries, we forget what a talent he is. Anscombe. He was a really good player when they won that Grand Slam a few years back. He was an outstanding player when he was with the New Zealand under-20s, and he could be quite a player going forward in this tournament.
He's got a fair bit of the old Stephen Jones about him. I'm not talking about the Sunday Times journalist. He's reminiscent of Jones in his. You can see the percentages, the calculations going on in his mind. It's almost as though they're the calculators on his forehead. He was very good, and for somebody who I thought looked like he'd been out of the game for the best part of 3 years against Portugal, when he didn't look anything like, and he comes on with 5 minutes gone yesterday or whatever it was, and I feared for Wales at that point. You think, crikey, and he didn't put a foot wrong. Terrific.
Very good.
I think you guys are right. Anscombe has always been a talent. He's been bugged with injuries, and as you've just mentioned, I think the fact that he and playing in the shadow of Biggar for a while, I think coming onto this field, a big game like this under pressure, he stood up to it. That's a sign of a player with BMT, with class. There's no doubt about it. And he stood up to it, and he played a massive role. I think one got to lift your head for him. I think he really had a great game.
Did you ever play, Kobus, with a Springbok captain who shouted at his players in the way that Dan Biggar does?
Never. Our forwards would never have allowed that anyway.
And if they had, what would you have done about it, Kobus?
Well, he would have been more injured than playing. And I'm not talking on the field injuries. No, he gets. I must. I've got nothing against Dan Biggar. I think he's just a very emotional player. He's like, he's like most fly-offs. They sound more aggressive than they really are.
Can't argue with that. Guys, we've got about 10 minutes left before we're going to run out of time. So let's do a little brief note on England. Kobus, I don't know if you watched the England game.
I think England came into this World Cup a lot of turmoil the last 12 months or year or so. You guys had a certain gentleman called Eddie Jones also involved in say that, obviously with a bit of sarcasm, but I think they sort of starting to gel together, starting to grow under the radar. Whether they'll go to a final is very debatable, but the fact remains, I think they're starting to find each other. They're starting to settle down and doing the basics right. So yeah, I think they're starting to compete. If I can really, if we're going to use that word.
I'm intrigued, Kobus. What do you feel about the fly half situation? That England have got. They've got George Ford, who's obviously come in and played extremely well, and now they've got Farrell come back in after his ban. A lot of people, there's a significant debate in England about Farrell's effectiveness as a 12, which is where he shifts to when Ford comes into the side. What's your instinct about what they should do at 10? Well,
you also said with the big talent of Marcus Smith, which have now Hughes at number 15, he played well there because he's a footballer. There's no doubt about it. You can play him anywhere, he'll do well. He's a talented player. But, I mean, the question must be asked and the decision must be made. Is he the future at 10, Marcus Smith? Then stick him there and stick with him and play with him. I think, Farrell, obviously, a talisman, he's been around for a long time. He can be a bit of a hothead and get into trouble, as we've seen. But is he the future? Is he the answer at inside centre? In the long run, I'm not so convinced. Ford obviously came in. He's always had immense talent. We know that he's always been somebody that they say has got massive talent. And he started the World Cup with an absolute bang. And now he's the guy in the hot seat at this stage. And I say if he continues his form, it'll be hard for the coach to move him somewhere else. So what do you do with Marcus Smith then? Do you stick him at the back and stay with him at the back? Do you stay with Farrell at inside centre? It's a bit of a tough thing for the coach, I think, at this stage, or decision to make.
I think he's, for what it's worth, I think he's already flagged that Farrell is his man and will be in the team. I don't think that there's any question about that, and I suspect it'll be them going back to Ford and Farrell, and possibly I don't see them bringing Smith in at fullback when it gets to the knockout stage ahead of Stewart. I just think that the fullback is one of the best aerial players, I think, in the game at the moment. And given what we see in knockout football, I think that if you've got somebody at fullback who isn't good under the high ball, I think that you're put yourself in a vulnerable position.
I pay good money to watch Marcus Smith under the high ball against Peter Steph du Toit. That would be very funny.
I think you guys are dead right. When it comes to playoffs, I think any sensible coach will know it'll be high risk to have any experiment. You need solid people that's proven themselves in certain positions, like a 9, like a 10, like 15, 8th man. That solid line from the hooker right through. You want people that can stand up, that can take the lead, that can show the way, that can absorb pressure, because that's what playoffs are about. It's not spectacular games most of the times. It's hard, blood, sweat, and tears grind, making the right decisions and playing to win the game, to move on. That's all that counts. They're not going to say this team is such an incredible team. They played the most beautiful rugby, but never made it out of the pool stages. Nobody cares. It's who gets to the final, and at the end, the scoreboard tells the story. It's actually as simple as that.
I mean, the Samoa game will tell us all, won't it? Because you've got to bring all the strands together now and go with the gun 15 against Samoa as a final dress rehearsal for the quarter-final. So we've had, like, back row is another area. We're really not quite sure what England's best back row is either. And even in the back three, has Henry Arundel done enough to start pressing for place? So there's so many balls in the air with England at the moment, but they have to make these decisions for the Samoa match. There has to be a full dress rehearsal for 7 days later, when it will be much tougher.
Thing is, some of the guys played really well on Saturday, but it's a little bit like Dupont playing training field tricks against Namibia. It was against Chile. It's a 70-point victory. The games that are ahead of them, particularly when they get into the knockout stage, are a completely different kettle of fish. And this England side and its attacking game, I don't think is anywhere near as developed as people are talking about post a game against someone who could not beat them, who simply were not equipped to test England to any significant degree. So what they'll do, I think, is what they did back in 2007 when they got to the final, against all expectations. I think they'll pick the tough nuts. I think they'll attack the breakdown really hard. They did that against Ireland in Dublin and made life really, really uncomfortable for them in that Grand Slam match until Stewart was sent off and the whole game was slightly dislocated. I think that they'll chuck everything at the breakdown. They'll be very, very, as Nick Evans said at the start of the tournament, they may not be the greatest attacking side in the world, but they are equipped to be very difficult to beat. And if they pick their hard nuts, and Farrell's one for sure, but I think that they'll pull the 07 trick, and they'll say, we're not going to do very much, but I'll tell you what, guys, you're going to do even less. because we're going to be a pain in the ass all game.
Yeah.
Who takes the goal kicks if Ford and Farrell play then?
Farrell used to when they were in the 12.
Oh, yeah.
No, they're old. They're old, and they're old in now. They're almost as old as me. Those blokes. I know that the guy who played 10 felt it was somehow stripping away a bit of his manhood if he wasn't permitted to take the kicks. I think they're beyond that. I think Farrell should go.
Would you? While you guys are arguing about Farrell, would you feel offended if we contract him just for a game or two on a kicking basis if you guys don't use him?
Well, I mean, it would be loyalty on the Eddie Jones scale if he went to Spring just for 80 minutes.
I'll tell you.
He's very loved as a player in our country. I mean,
I'll tell you what, Kobus, we'd strike that deal with you, but you'd have to play him at 13.
Well, indeed, and you'd have to give us Ebenezer.
Well, yeah, we'll up the price a bit.
Actually, Andre Esterhazy, you don't seem to want to pick him. We could do with Andre.
Yeah, we could have Esterhazy, and we'd love.
And he's he was qualified through residency, but now you've gone and picked him again.
Yeah, exactly, bastards. Guys, we've got about 5 minutes left. Let me trouble you all for the usual, and Kobus, I haven't told you about this, the moment of the round, the player of the round, and the match of the round. Again, match of the round similar to last week. I'm going to just say we all agree it's Ireland, South Africa, or South Africa, Ireland, sorry, unless anyone has any objections.
Only a minor objection. The most enjoyable match, as opposed to the best match, Portugal, Georgia, was a joy to watch.
I'm with you there, Brent. And that is the beauty of having those second tier sides and down playing matches where defeat is not guaranteed when they take the field. Portugal had something to aim at and something genuine to aim at against Georgia, and they delivered. It was absolutely brilliant to watch. I want to watch 18 all, no matter who it's against or who it's between. I want to watch 18 all 100 times out of 100 rather than 72-0. Seriously.
I want to watch Portugal every day of the week. I could watch Portugal.
Cracking game. Yeah.
100%.
Should there not be, guys, a cup and a shield?
Yes. Yes. We've all argued that, yes. Unquestionably.
Kobus, we've been writing this forever, Kobus, and it's gone nowhere. So what we now need is someone of substantial physical size to go along to World Rugby and pick up the nearest bloke in a suit and tie you can find and pin him against the wall until it happens. I'm looking at you, Kobus, because you're the first person I can think of.
Of course, you guys know that you gain experience by playing against better and bigger size. Of course, that's just the story of life. But it's a double-edged sword. It serves no purpose when a team loses with 70 or 80 points. It doesn't serve that team or the game of rugby or the winner. So I'm with you guys there. I think there should be. And then you give the guys that are the winners or the top two of the shield that they could play, qualify to play in the cup playoff. So that's how those guys. So you need to prove yourself that you are worthy of at least playing in a semi or a quarter against the bigger dogs.
Kobus, this occurred to me at the end of the Italy-Uruguay game. World Rugby dodged a bullet there because if Uruguay, Italy were decent winners in the end. But if Uruguay had played the second half, they played the first half and snuck a victory, they would have finished third in that pool and would have had automatic qualification to the World Cup in 2027. Between now and 2027, they would have played precisely no one. No one at all in terms of tier one fixtures. Whereas Italy would still be playing a full Six Nations for the next 4 seasons. So the imbalance is obvious. If you want these teams to rock up at a World Cup and perform, you have to give them the proper build-up over 4 years. If you're not going to do that, have a cup and shield competition, as we say, organise it how you like, but you just get far more competitive fixtures in that format. And it's a broadcaster's dream because then you can play that Monday to Thursday.
I think to add on to what you're saying, the point proven, to add on to what you say, the fact that Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa have been so competitive, they've been playing all this time in the New Zealand League, Australian League, in the UK. They are playing at a top level consistently. So when they get together, they just need to gel. But they can individually absorb this kind of pressure, know the playing field, know the levels of play. They're used to it.
I think that I think it's extraordinary, actually, when you look at the Portuguese and the Uruguayans. They're the two sides that really have caught my attention. You look at the quality that they've managed to produce, given the sort of fixture list that they've got and the level of rugby that they're playing at a lot of the time. All I can say is that I think that the sort of South American Super League that they've got is obviously competitive, or more competitive than what they had before, because they are a very, very interesting. The Uruguayans and the Portuguese are very, very interesting sides. And you talk about a player of the round. I thought that the open side flanker Ardao for Uruguay was absolutely outstanding. I mean, he's as good a flanker as I've seen in any side, anywhere.
6 turnovers.
And Martins of Portugal, Big Seven. He is just a fabulous player. Why he's not in the top 14, I've no idea.
Yeah, very much agreed. Kobus, who was your player of the round?
It's difficult. I think if one really needs to compare apples with apples, I would love to see these players I've just been mentioning, the smaller teams, how would they fit in an England side, in a South African side, in an All Black side, with better people around them. They will obviously be even better. But I think a guy that's made, not only in this round, but so far in the World Cup, has made an impact is Bandi Aki. I thought he's played a massive role. And I think he's maybe one of the unsung heroes that for not only the Irish side at this stage, but their success. So I think he's still going to play a massive role for them. And again, on crucial moments against South Africa, he did some brilliant things to keep the back line together and absorb the pressure and get them over the advantage line. So I would pick him.
Chris?
Carter Gordon. Well, actually, Eddie meant to pick a bloke called Gordon Carter, who apparently is absolutely brilliant. But no, I mean that's cruel. I mean, the bloke's
you're dead right.
The bloke's had
very bad taste.
For me, Jack Morgan.
Yeah, can't disagree.
I mean, the bloke's absolutely playing the house down.
Yeah.
Moment of the round. We'll go in reverse order. So, Chris, I'll come to you again, back to back in.
Oh, my moment of the round was, well, it was I have two, and it's the same bloke, and one's bad and one's good. It's obviously Dupont. I mean, I can't remember which of the try-scoring kicks was better against Namibia, but they were just flashes. I mean, that's just rugby imagination. And it's a privilege to watch that stuff. But of course, what then happened to him, and that was really a rugby incident, I think. But it was, if you're talking about significant moments, that may turn out to be the most significant moment of the tournament so far.
Kobus?
I'm going to sound like a typical supporter now. His team just lost. The moment Ben O'Keefe blew the whistle when the ball was out at the back of the ruck, and the game was over for South Africa.
This is the man who said just now, well, of course, it's unfair to blame the referee. We couldn't possibly blame the referee. And then you go for an hour and he's the biggest bastard who ever walked the face of the earth.
Kobus has forgotten that we're still recording.
1 second.
Oh, dear. Brendan?
I'm going to give you two. I enjoyed the moment when James Lowe stepped in like a father at a 5-year-old party and picked up the naughty Ebenezer bed and just followed him around like a ragdoll naughty boy. That was an extraordinary moment. And I absolutely loved the second Portugal try. Just aesthetically, it was a beautiful piece of work with the number 10 dummy inside, hook pass back inside, Storty doing 50 metres in about 4.8 seconds. That was a glorious thing to watch.
Yeah.
Nick?
Well, we haven't seen the Fijian since last weekend, but I would go to Kuravoli. I thought that his salvo of penalties for a bloke who'd never been a front rank goal kicker before, and then the sort of the ice capped up and under he put up, which before Tuisova scored, I thought that was a fantastic effort by a young scrum half.
On that point, you know, if Farrell turns down, we will be talking to him as well.
Yeah. and that Tongan bloke who doesn't miss either.
Yeah.
Havili, crikey. I mean, he's been pretty accurate. I mean,
I will just offer a little moment of the round as well, just in case anyone, for whatever reason, hasn't seen the clip of the Irish fans singing Zombie by the Cranberries after full time. And when they turned the song down on the tannoy system, and it felt like 60,000 people, I'm sure it was probably about 20,000, just kept singing it.
Without wishing to hose on your parade, I wouldn't know the Cranberries from a cheeseburger because I'm just too old. But isn't that particular song does that not have some political sensitivities to it?
For the purposes of that clip, no, Chris. Politics doesn't have to be a part of everything.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to drag these things up.
Well, I suggest that go for the cheeseburger.
Yeah, exactly. Stick with the cheeseburger.
No, I can't. Franz Malherb's had them all.
Right, guys, we'll wrap up there. Plenty more to look forward to in the pool stages. And Kobus, are you still predicting South Africa will win the World Cup?
For sure, mate. I mean, they are definitely one of the favourites still. There's no doubt about this. Like I said, take nothing away. Ireland this time around and deservingly, but it wasn't a knife edge, could have gone either way. But again, World Cups have proven in the past, when it comes to playoffs, anything is possible. But South Africa certainly has the goods to go all the way.
Anything is possible. And the build-up to a massive quarterfinal weekend has very much begun. So we've got that to look forward to. Kobus, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, we'll catch you soon.
Thanks, boys. Have a great one.
Good to see you, Kobus.
Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Rugby Paper podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use and recommend the show to your friends. The Rugby Paper is available to buy every Sunday. And to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe through our print, digital and online options at therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions. That's therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions to get all our content for as little as 14p per day.